Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. With us today, we have Javier, who is going to be talking about static web asset. And we have John and myself, and we are going to be doing, moderating and questions and things like that. And before we jump into the main topic, we have some community links. So I think we should share my screen.
All right, I got it.
Perfect, thank you. So if it's your first time here, we do this thing called community links. And what it is we showcase some ASP.NET related content from the community to give some recognition to the community and keep people up to date on some interesting things that are happening. So let's jump right into that. First, we have a blog post that demonstrates how to build a simple AI app using Blazor. It uses the Azure OpenAI service, and it builds kind of a sort of a Copilot / ChatGPT like app. So you can ask it questions and it gives responses. And it's sort of like a minimal AI Blazor app. And at the top, there's a link to a GitHub repo actually that shows the code. So if you want to build a sort of chat-like application or some other way to integrate it into your Blazor app, this might be a good project to reference. Next, we have a project called Easy API. And this one I thought was really interesting. I saw a post about it on Reddit, so that's why I'm including it here. But it's in .NET 8 and Blazor, we introduced this concept called a render mode. And it lets you, within the same app, render components in that run in different places. So for example, you can do what's called static server rendering, where you have components that run on the server and produce content that gets loaded statically onto the page, right? You can also do interactive rendering. And if you do that, you have the choice between server interactivity and WebAssembly interactivity. So if you use server interactivity, then your code's still running on the server, but it's producing live updates on the page through a WebSocket connection. If you're running in WebAssembly, then your code runs completely in the browser, and you don't even need to be constantly communicating with the server, although you still can if you want to do things like invoke APIs and things like that. But coming back to this, the problem that this solves is if you have an app that uses both, that uses some kind of rendering on the server and WebAssembly interactivity, then if you want to invoke APIs on the server, that kind of works in two different ways. Because if your component's running on the server, you can just invoke the server code directly. But if you're running in the browser, you need to invoke it some other way, maybe through an HTTP client. So what Easy API does is it unifies those two, because what you normally have to do is, if you need an API to be invoked in both those different ways, you'd create some sort of abstraction over it, like define an interface that has an implementation for WebAssembly and an implementation for the server. Easy API just lets you define the API once, and you kind of don't have to worry about it. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. You can just define your API and then inject this. Yeah, it is magic. Yeah, and then you inject the service into your component. It's like, I think it's iCall or something like that. Yeah. And then you can just call the API directly, and you don't have to, set up more boilerplate to make it work. I haven't actually tried this, so I'll be interested to see if other people want to give it a shot, or if you have other solutions to this, it'd be interesting to hear about them.
This looks awesome. I really want it. People are asking, is it using source generators, or how it's actually doing it, or is it just like an abstraction layer? Yeah.
I'm not sure if it uses source generators. I haven't done a super deep dive into it, but I'm curious too.
That's really cool. That. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good find.
Yeah, seems like an interesting idea. Yeah. So that's Easy API. I will move on to the next thing now. So this is a YouTube video, and it's not a new it's not a new video. It's been around for about a year, but I saw it recently and thought it was cool. Radzen is a component library for Blazor, and they have this thing called Blazor Studio, which lets you kind of scaffold and design a Blazor app using Radzen components. So you can connect your database and use that to scaffold models and create a UI. I'm not going to watch the whole video right now, of course, but I can just kind of skip through it. And they have a bunch of options to configure about what kind of features you want in your app. And it gives you a pretty solid foundation for building a Blazor app using Radzen. And also has like a code viewer / editor and a designer view you can see here. It's pretty cool. So now if you're using Radzen, or if you aren't but want to, this might be an interesting thing to check out. Next, we have a new, hard to read the text. Yeah, I'll zoom in a little bit. So next we have a library by Christopher Strube. Christopher writes a lot of these Blazor libraries that wrap browser interfaces. So this one handles the window object. So you can do things like show alerts and pop-ups and stuff like that without having to write any JavaScript code. So there's a demo site here. I'll just open it up real quick. And one thing I thought was interesting is you can open like a pop-up window, and then these things can directly communicate with each other. So if I do like hello or something, then it communicates with the main window, and you can see that the main window received that message. And this is all done without JavaScript. So if you want a feature like that, or also there's like alerts and like confirm dialogues and things like that. Normally you'd have to use JS interrupt to make those things come up. But this just provides like a nice C# wrapper around those things, so you don't have to worry about JavaScript. So yeah, there's that one. And finally, we have a blog post by John Hilton, and this talks about some of the improvements that are coming, or that came in preview 4 for .NET 9. And it talks about some of the improvements that are happening there. One is like static SSR pages with interactive Blazor web apps. So when we in .NET 8, we added an option to the template. You can either when you create a Blazor app, you can either select top level interactivity, which means I just want my whole app to be interactive, or you can select per page interactivity, which is like static server rendering is the default, but you can opt into interactivity on a per page basis. There are times when you select the top level interactivity option, but you still want to have some pages get rendered statically. And in .NET 8, that was a little tricky to do. I won't get into the mechanics of how you had to set it up, but we had to do some trickery in like the identity templates to make that work well. Now there's a feature for it that makes it a lot simpler. So if you want to have some static pages within an otherwise interactive app, that's this blog post explains that pretty well. And then it also covers some other things, like we have WebSocket compression now, and other things as well. So it's a good overview of some of the things that we've done so far in .NET 9. And that is it, I think, for the community link. So Javier, if you want to take it away.
Awesome. Let me pull up my mini presentation, and let me actually share my screen. Okay. Window here. Awesome. So yeah. Okay. So one of the things that we wanted to do as part of .NET 9 was to optimize how we deliver all the files in your app to the browser, not just, for example, in the case of Blazor, DLLs and so on, because we realized that an app is way more than just like the Blazor DLLs. You have your CSS framework that is Bootstrap or Material or whatever other framework that you want, that brings a sizable chunk of data. And the more you start adding libraries, and those libraries start bringing JavaScript, the more that slows down your app. And right now, you have to take additional steps to make all those things serve optimally, essentially. So as part of optimizing file delivery, there are, by the way, you can see my screen, can you? Just in case.
Yep. Yeah, we can see
it.
Okay.
Awesome.
It might be a little better if you can actually present the slides. I don't know.
If let me just do that. It's sharing the wrong screen. Let me, I go here and I do. No, let me switch the presenter view.
Presenter view hits me every time.
Yeah, I don't remember when the display settings again. So, but awesome. So yeah, so there are a few improvements that we are doing to the way that that we serve and process files during the build and publish steps of your app. And the idea here is that for the majority of your apps, you're not going to have files that get added after the app has been published or has been built to the www root folder. The set of files that your app contains is typically known at build time or publish time, essentially. So we've built a feature where we are capable of capturing all the information that we have about those files during the build and publish steps, and surface that information to the runtime so that we can more optimally serve the files. So one of the things that we've done is we are now compressing all the files in your app that benefit from compression, not just in the case of Blazor, the Blazor files, but if you have MVC or Razor pages, all your CSS, all your JavaScript is going to be served optimally out of the box, compressed out of the box. Then we do things like content-based e-tags, which means that we generate an e-tag that is based on the content, and that e-tag won't change unless the file physically changes. So that means that if, for example, you do a deployment, and in the past, the static files middleware, we use the last write time of the file to determine if it was modified, or if your build process always build the same file, but doesn't and overwrites it with the same contents in the past, you would have gotten like a fresh e-tag and a fresh file, so to speak. And now you won't have to re-download the file unless the actual content changes. So it's improving the cache hits. Now, the work that we've done integrates static files with routing. So static files become endpoints, and that brings a bunch of benefits. For example, there's no more issues with case sensitivity on Linux and Mac. So if you somehow are testing your app on Windows and you see that you type the file name with a different casing, that's not a problem in Windows, but then you go to deploy on Linux and suddenly you are getting 404s and don't know why that is. That's not going to be a problem anymore. Then you also have don't have conflicts between the static files and the other routes in your app. So, for example, a typical case that happens is that people register a route with a parameter, and suddenly their files stop being served because the route with the parameter is catching all those file requests. So that's no longer a problem because files are now part of the same system, and they are served with higher priority. And that way, we essentially are able to mitigate that issue that is really tricky to debug, because the two changes that you make and the effect that happens on the page don't have a good correlation. Like, you need to know about how the internals work to spot that issue quickly. Now, there are other things that since now files are endpoints, are easier to do, like, for example, restricting who can access the contents of the files, because since they are now endpoints, you can go to the endpoints and say add authorization, and that will make sure that, like, your authorization method, your authorization middleware runs and logs the request before serving the content, for example. There are other things that we're doing. For example, we are also doing unique URLs per resource based on their contents. So what that means is, for example, you have in your app site.css, and obviously when you make a change and deploy a new version, if you haven't set up caching headers, then there is a chance that the browser will reuse an older version of that file. And that can happen with CSS, can happen with JavaScript, and so on. So content-based unique URLs, or fingerprinted URLs, as we call them, are essentially additional URLs where we expose each one of the files that has a hash of the file attached to the URL. So that means that that content is never going to change unless the file changes. And the moment the file contents change, that URL will be different. And that has an additional benefit, which is we can do better caching for these types of things. So, for example, for all the files right now, JavaScript, CSS that don't have caching, that don't have a unique URL, we'll add a no cache content to make sure that you always get fresh content on those. But for all the URLs, we'll give you the ability to get this content specific URL that is unique. And with that one, we can say cache this file forever, because that file is never going to be, that URL is never going, or the file in that URL is never going to change. So that means that the next time a user visits a page, they don't have to go and re-download the file. They don't even have to check if the file is up to date, because we've told the browser this file will be this URL will never the contents of this URL will never change, essentially. So
I had one question. Maybe it's too early to ask about this, but
yeah,
way back in the day, with .NET framework and stuff, long time ago, there was, they called it RAMFAR, Run All Managed Modules for All Requests, or something like that. And it was a thing where if you wanted to turn on like authorization, like endpoint style checks and optimizations, you could do it, but there were huge like performance impacts on it. You know what I mean? Or there were like people really cautioned you about it because they said it's now not able to just serve static files. It has to do a lot of extra checking. I'm assuming now the way that the middleware and endpoints work, that's not a problem now.
Yeah, that because with I don't remember the acronym, or Run All Managed Modules. Mm-hmm. You essentially still have to do the same work. You just like put the stuff on top. And in this case, the work that you have to do is somewhat less, because we don't have to go and check in the file system if the file exists to match it. So it's much faster to like get the request and match it through routing. And then with regards to any additional work, we don't also have to run a lot of the code that the static files middleware had to do, because once we match a file, then we just know that like we need to grab it and serve it pretty much, and we have all the information about that file pre-computed at real time. So we don't have to go and compute an impact, because we computed that impact at real time and we've shared it with the runtime. So of course, if you add authorization and other stuff on top of the like the static file that is being served, that's obviously going to be more work, but it would be the same amount of work if you wanted to achieve the same thing with the static files middleware, because you would need to fork the pipeline, and you would need to then say use authentication or use authorization. I don't remember, use authorization, and then run everything there before you actually go to serve the file. So the work that you do is similar.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome. So let me go back to the slides because I have the demo for the end. So some of the gains that like you get by compressing files. So for the benefit of compressing versus no compressing in general is about between 60 and 80% of size reduction. On the left, we have the size reduction that we get for a typical Blazor Pages app. that only contains Bootstrap, jQuery, and all that stuff that we're all familiar and love. And then for a Blazor web app, you can also see a similar result. And I want to be very clear that this is not a reduction on top of the compression of the DLLs and everything that we do. This only affects assets that we have not compressed. But in general, what you can expect is around that 60 to 80% size reduction. Do you have another question?
No, I was just saying I think it was showing the wrong slide because it wasn't showing the measurements. That was all I was gonna say.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to go to the measurements yet because I wanted to do the demo actually. So let me show you how a bunch of this stuff works. So let me just close everything here. So I'm gonna go first to our Razor Pages app. I have here my Razor Pages app, and you have here use static files, and you have map Razor Pages. Now,
showing the wrong screen still. Sorry.
Yeah,
we're on the wrong.
Sorry. That's weird. Let me do one thing. Let me stop sharing and let me reshare. Because it seems that it was stuck. All right, so are you able to see my screen now?
Oops. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I haven't used StreamYard in a while, so maybe I did something wrong. Okay, so let me do 200. So you can see your typical Razor app here that you're familiar with, use static files, map Razor Pages. If I now go to the same app but in .NET 9, you'll see that use static files is gone and map static assets is in. And this is the bit that contains that extra magic to do the additional things that we talk about. So now I'm going to go and run this from run the .NET 8 app from the console. Okay, so this is up. I'm going to so here's my Razor Pages app. And I'm going to open the DevTools here so that we can see some things. First, I'm going to go here to application, make sure that everything is clear, network, and then I just refresh the page. Sorry, actually, let me just do this proper. So let's work here. Let's go here. Okay, so I refresh the page, and you can see, for example, Bootstrap here is being served. You see, this is the tag that we generate, and this is a concoction that static files does based on the last time the file that was written. We generate a tag essentially out of that. And then you can see the size here of the file. So this is .NET 8. That's nothing new. And now let's go to the other Visual Studio here and set up Razor 9. Okay, so I now go ahead and run the app. So this is the same app. The only thing that I've changed is .NET 9. And I open the network tools. I'm gonna do a hard refresh. Okay. So now you can see, for example, when we set Bootstrap, that Bootstrap comes back gzip.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It looked like it had 2 e tags. Is that right?
Yes, because one is because one is a strong e tag and the other one is a weak e tag. Is think of how e tags work. The strong one is like I'm an e tag that is I'm independent of the representation, and the other one is I'm dependent on the representation. So it's a behavior for doing range requests essentially. So that if you have an e tag, whether it's weak or strong, you can do like a full a request for the entire file, and the server then can say 3 or 4 or whatever. But if you do a partial request and you only have a weak e tag, the server might say no, I don't have that content.
Okay. Wow.
But yeah, so you can see now here, for example, the e tag is data has all the, like, it's based on the content, as we said. And for some reason, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, that is not showing the size. This should show the size.
I'm glad it's not just you. Every time I try and demonstrate something in browser tools to show like compression or anything, I never get it. Like it never works for me. I end up using private.
Yeah, at the very least, you can see that it's being served compressed because it's being served with the encoding and with all the headers and everything, and all the stuff is the stuff that we like figure out and build. The runtime doesn't really have any knowledge of it.
No, so that's gzip. Does I also always hear about Brotli these days? Does it do Brotli as well, or?
Yeah, so we do gzip during development so that you get somewhat of a reasonably accurate size of your app, but then we further optimize it during publish with Brotli. So I believe I have Brotli here.
You can click on that hide thing where it says stop sharing and hide down at the bottom.
Yeah.
And that'll,
Oh, yeah, so if I list all the files, you can see here that like they all have like Brotli on them. So by default, we just copy the file side by side with GC and BR as extension for the Brotli files, and you can also see the kind of the length of the file already like showing. If we do, for example, lib and we do bootstrap.
nice.
You can see that everything within your app like gets compressed. Yeah, so we'll start here. You can see the size differences already. Okay, so let me just like go ahead and like run this. Why is it complaining? Okay, I think it's because I've changed something in. Oh, it's because the environment. So I'm running now this on localhost. I'm gonna open here the network tab. I'm gonna take this here. And then go to application, clear site data, network, refresh. Yeah. Okay, so now you can see that it's being served broadly, and you see that like it's 17K and it's not like 173 or 160 and so on. And similar for jQuery and similar for like the push-up bundle and so on. And the point that I want to make with this is that in places like Blazor, for example, we do a lot of work to optimize the kind of initial app and initial experience. We compress the DLLs and we try to reduce the size of the runtime to the minimum. But then when you have a real app, you're gonna start like downloading npm scripts and like dumping stuff in your www root folder and things like that are going to very quickly and easily blow the size of your app. So the goal of this feature is that we should apply the same treatment and try to serve those files in the same way we do for other files in the framework, essentially. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, I love this because this is part of the whole thing about ASP.NET being a whole like the middleware and the core work that goes on in .NET platform and ASP.NET middleware and all that benefits everybody. So like a lot of the time, we'll talk about like this is Blazor community stand-up, but what you're showing here is static file improvements, and they help my MVC apps and my Razor Pages apps and everything, right? So yeah.
Exactly. And I have another demo that I want to show you that exemplifies this. So I went ahead and I downloaded Blazor on an app. I'm not picking on Blazor or anything. It's just to show you that like there are many libraries that will bring a ton of assets. Or if you want to pick like or authorization packages, they bring like 300K of JavaScript, and those don't get optimized. But now if I have this app here, and I'm not going to show the like published one, and the only thing that I've done to this app is just install Blazor and reference the scripts. So this looks like a typical Blazor app. But when you see here Blazor, you see that it's 50K out of 500K. And that's just the GC that we do during like development, sort of speak. As compared to in 8, and I think I need to go to the command line to run 8.
While you're typing here, just pointing out this is really cool. The push D and pop D is a way to add and remove things from the remove the current path to the stack. Scott Hanselman wrote a blog post on this years ago. I always Google up Hanselman push D when I forget. But
okay, yeah, I'm in the wrong one. I should have done now I'm in the wrong folder.
Another thing to point out just while you're typing is you're using Oh My Posh, which is really cool. And there's different settings you can do for that. And the one you've got there shows the current preview that you're running. So you can very easily see which .NET version is active in that folder.
Yes, all that stuff is like bread and butter. I think I cannot live without it. Okay, so this is for comparison with like the 8 version, so that you can see the difference. Like it's like an order of magnitude of difference. And this is the average library I would expect. Like this is your I picked Blazor, but like pick Fluent UI, it brings also like 400K of like JavaScript 2 and so on. So the interesting part is that the bigger your app becomes, the bigger this effect is, because the more libraries you bring in, the more in the past that would have bloated your app. Okay, so if I go back to my slides, let me see. Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and present, and I'm gonna like switch.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, let's go down here. Or over here. We'll go there.
Awesome. So here are like in numbers, more or less, some of the data. So for example, for a Razor Pages app, you get like an average reduction of like 77% over like no compression. And then for like the Blazor case, for example, when you do like broadly compression, you get like 93% reduction on the size of the CSS and 81% or 50% on the like JavaScript.
Wow.
And this is something that you could have done in the past, but it would have required a non-trivial amount of work. And even in the cases where you say, oh, but I set up dynamic compression on IIS, still it's not going to be that good. You are going to be able to gzip your content, and then maybe you're going to get like 80K. And actually, for the Blazor case, if you go to the Blazor page and look at the compressed file, it's 80 or 90 kilobytes with gzip compression from IIS. So by serving broadly compressed to the max, you're still getting like a 60% reduction in size over the reduction that you were getting with compression, with dynamic compression. And you don't have to do the work at runtime, essentially. You get this step at build time. And that has the benefit also that you cannot spend 5 minutes at runtime compressing something, but you can spend 5 minutes on your build compressing something if that is going to optimize millions of requests.
So I have a question. Here you're showing CSS and JavaScript. For my applications, usually the biggest static files are images. Is there any, does I don't know, does Brightly or gzip, or does any of this apply to images?
No, images are something that is already compressed in most cases, unless it's SVG and stuff like that, which we will do. So we essentially have a list of, these are the things that we can compress, and these are the things that we shouldn't compress because they are already compressed. Maybe in the future we do something for images because the infrastructure that we've built allows us to potentially do these types of things. So for example, imagine the fact that you have an image that is like 4K and you are like rendering it in a very small place.
Yeah.
And that's a very common thing. Like maybe in the future we have some tooling to like scale it down or to like compress it in a BIF or WebP or any of the other formats that are much more efficient for delivery. That's not something that we have, but that's something that maybe in the future we build in that fashion. Because we have the ability with the system that we've built to do things like if you request a PNG, but you send us an accept header and say that you support a BIF, we're able to serve you a BIF directly. And we can do all that magic through like the build system and transfer all that information to the runtime.
Wow. Okay, let me see. There's a question here about Azure CDN. Does this have any interaction with any of the, like, I don't know, Azure file hosting things?
So we don't have any particular integration with any CDN or provider. You benefit the most of this. So to benefit from this, you need to be hosted in an aspnetcore core right now. But all the information that we generate is kind of baked into a JSON manifest that contains a full description of the files that are available under which conditions they need to be served, and the responses that the server needs to produce for those. So I haven't done it, and I don't think we'll do it for 9. But you could transform that information into something into a web config file, for example, or into a manifest that like engines or any other like server you want would understand. It would not be very hard to plug this in into something like Javier.
Wow.
And so on.
So I think this was sort of a joke, but this is interesting here. Like Phil Snabble saying, our biggest file is swagger.json, but I think Swagger is your Swagger JSON. I should remember better because we just did one on this. I think that's generated dynamically.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's generated on the server. For that, you can still enable compression on that particular like endpoint, but that's not something that we're targeting with this change. This is the types of apps that are that are going to benefit the most from this change are apps that serve content, web applications. And the biggest impact that you're going to see is on the size of the app, the time it takes to download to the browser, which you are going to see a bigger impact in terms of, and this is very app dependent, and I do not have metrics right now to show you, but like maybe in a couple of months we do another one, and I show you more stuff and more real cases scenarios. But all this compression and all this trying to push the files as fast to the browser as possible impacts your like how long it takes to render the content on the screen, essentially. And how does your app behave when you are on a 3G or 4G or on a spotty connection? Because we all are comfy in like Europe and the US, where we have like broadband. But even, for example, in the US, I know that the moment you leave the city and you go to the woods, like your connection is a completely different story. So reducing the size of the things that like your site needs to download to work helps in those scenarios, because if your connection is spotty or something like that, you're not waiting 30 minutes for your like for your site to load, and there is a much smaller chance that the site fails to load because the connection dropped for like a second or so.
And, things too like the e-tags is a huge deal, because if I already have the files cached, I don't even have to download it at all.
Exactly. So and actually that's perfect, because I can use that to show the last demo that I have that is not finished, because I was trying to get this to work before this talk, but I've been trying to get a build for the past 2 days without success. But one of the things that I want to show you is content-specific URLs, which we have here. So this is for Blazor, and MVC also will get it. We'll get it if you use something like the ~/ syntax. There is this assets property now in components that we're still trying to like figure out. But essentially, this is this tells Blazor, hey, give me the content unique URL for this other URL, and I have it here. So, and there's a good chance that this demo doesn't work because I updated the SDK trying to get this to work in the last minute before this, and some stuff might break, but we'll give it the good old college try. So yeah, it worked actually. So I downloaded the page, but you can see now that like you don't get bootstrap.min, you get this like bootstrap like a million things. Here you still get the e tags and everything. You now get Yeah, so you now get this mask. Actually, it worked.
Wow.
This is great. So you get now this max age for like 1 year immutable. This is essentially telling the browser this file is never going to change. So what this means is that, like, if I just I'm gonna clear the log and refresh, you can see now that it downloaded anything, like it took it from the disk patch.
Nice.
And it has not even gone to the, I don't know if in this case has gone to the server, I don't think so. It doesn't even go to the server for the content. So this means that, like, one less request is one less thing that can go wrong. If you have a spotty connection or something like that, if you're able to do this with the vast majority of your apps, you can imagine that the size of the next request that you make is like around 1% or 2% of the size of your initial request. So maybe you are saving 90 to 98% of the bandwidth in requests that come after the first request. And since we've done the e-tags based on content and so on, even if you continue deploying your app, as long as the content doesn't change, like, your users are gonna get back to that experience.
Wow, this is really cool. So when you were first talking about the immutable files, I was thinking, well, that's a little dangerous but because you're renaming the file, it's all good.
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
And the way this is done is like in an incredibly backwards compatible way. If I grab this same file and I go here and I remove this e tag, this fingerprint, if I just request the file, I still get the file back. But you can see now that the cache header is set to no cache.
Mm-hmm.
So that essentially no cache doesn't mean do not store the file. It means the next time you need to use this file, you need to go and check back with the server that the file hasn't changed. And I don't know how to show it here. I think I cannot show it when it's the top level document. But when this is requested as a sub-resource, even in the cases that you ask, the service is going to send back 3 or 4 and say, it's up to date, essentially.
Wow.
So the goal here is to make sure that you only download things once and you download them as fast as possible. And other things that we are doing are optimizing the dependency chains of the files. So this is typically, for example, if you have a Blazor, you have your Blazor WebJS script, and that requests .NET.js, and .NET.js goes and requests like 30 other things, and those 30 other things like request DLLs. So all that stuff is it's a cascade of requests that we are trying to now flatten, so that the moment you say, I'm going to start WebAssembly, it goes and start downloading everything in parallel.
Okay.
Because we know we're going to need those things. And that's information that we have at build time, so to speak, but that we don't have at runtime. So I think we do, let me see if I can see here. Yeah, so this is very, very much work in progress. So I think there are still some bugs. I was going to show you that, for example, that happens when we have like other files that we know, like or CSS bundles. We automatically add link headers to say, go and download these other files because I'm just gonna import them right away. With the idea of front loading all the things that we're gonna use in the current document, so that the browser can front load all those and download them in parallel.
Wow. when you mention this, this makes me think too about the Blazor rendering models in .NET 8 and how it kind of downloads things in the background and stuff. Is there any kind of interaction with that?
So there is no particular interaction to it other than internal details of how WebAssembly works. Okay. So, for example, right now, WebAssembly maintains an internal cache of all the DLLs that it has downloaded. We are in the process of getting this integrated into one of the future previews, and we need to do work to integrate the Blazor bits on it. But once the Blazor bits are in, and once the Blazor integration is in, essentially we're going to be fingerprinting all the DLLs. So that means that we don't need to really have a cache, because we can say this DLL is never going to change, and we can let the browser, the HTTP cache, be the cache essentially.
Wow, that's cool.
So it's going to simplify a bunch of the things that we have in our internals.
Okay.
Because the other aspect of fingerprinting that I have not touched on is that this actually also helps during development, because we're now serving everything with no cache. So that means that you don't run into the situation that I'm sure everybody has run in development, where you F5 and say, why are changes not showing? And it's because the browser cached the file that you just modified. So that hopefully is a problem of the past. And then again, updating from version to version should also be a problem of the past, as long as you are using fingerprinted URLs, because those are going to work everywhere.
Wow. This is great.
Super cool.
So for people wanting to try this now, they can just grab the preview, or
preview 5 will have the bits around compression and the bits around fingerprinting and the bits around fingerprinting are being worked on right now.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. I want to know. This is awesome. Mackinnon, anything?
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I don't think so. I don't really see too many other questions in the chat. A lot of people like your jersey though, Javier. So
thank you.
Yeah, I
guess we can wrap up there.
We can wrap it up unless there are any other last minute questions that come in. But this was amazing.
For people that have try it and have other questions or things, obviously, sometimes we'll see them on here, but they should just leave an issue or discussion in the ASP.NET repo, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is that I don't know when Preview 5 comes out, but when Preview 5 is out, go and give it a try. See how it impacts the size of your app. The bigger the app, the bigger the expectation that the gains are. And tell us how it goes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess we'll wrap there. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.